The chair squeaked as I leaned back, the sterile hum of the dentist's office swallowing my nerves. My palms were slick, my heart hammering. Not from the drill's whine, but from the man who just walked in. His hazel eyes locking onto mine like he could see my soul. Dr. Julian Torres, my new dentist, was about to change my life in ways no filling ever could. I'm Ezra Brooks, a 24-year-old graphic designer scraping by in San Francisco's Mission District. My life was a collage of late-night gigs, instant ramen, and dodging my landlord's calls. Dental visits? A luxury I hadn't considered since my last wisdom tooth threw a tantrum. But a cracked molar and a discount coupon dragged me to Bright Smile Clinic, where Julian, a 26-year-old dentist with a disarming smile and a quiet intensity, was waiting. "Open wide," he said, his voice low, almost teasing, as he adjusted the light above me. I complied, my cheeks burning under his steady gaze. His gloved fingers brushed my jaw, steadying me, and I swear the room tilted. It wasn't just the Novocaine. There was something in that touch, gentle, deliberate, like he was tracing a map only he could read. I left the office that day with a patched-up tooth and a heart that wouldn't quit racing. San Francisco buzzed outside, all murals and taco trucks, but I was stuck replaying that moment. Julian's card, tucked into my pocket, felt like a secret I wasn't ready to share. I'd grown up in a small Ohio town where different was a dirty word, where I'd learned to hide who I was behind a crooked smile and quick jokes. Moving to the city was supposed to be my escape, but fear still clung to me like damp fog. Could someone like Julian, confident, kind, out, see something in me worth noticing? Days later, I found myself back at Bright Smile, claiming a follow-up I didn't need. Julian's laugh filled the room as he saw through my excuse. "Ezra, your molar's fine," he said, leaning against the counter, his white coat unbuttoned just enough to hint at the life beneath it. "You here for something else?" His eyes held a challenge, and my throat went dry. I mumbled something about sensitivity, but we both knew it wasn't about my teeth. That night, he texted me, "Coffee? Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Dolores Park." My hands shook as I typed back, "Sure." I didn't sleep. The next evening, we sat on a park bench, the city sprawling below us, lights twinkling like they were in on our secret. Julian talked about growing up in Oakland, his Mexican-American family, the pressure to be perfect. "I came out at 19, he said, his voice soft but steady. "Lost some people, gained myself." I envied that certainty. I hadn't said the words aloud, not even to myself. We walked through the Mission, past drag queens and street musicians, our shoulders brushing. He didn't push, didn't pry, but his presence felt like permission to breathe. When he reached for my hand, I froze, my old fears screaming. But his grip was warm, sure, and I let myself hold on. That night, under a flickering street lamp, he kissed me, soft, unhurried, like he'd been waiting for me his whole life. I'd never felt so seen. But shadows lingered. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mom, her voice tight with worry. "Ezra, you sound different. Are you okay?" I hadn't told her about Julian, about me. Back in Ohio, love like this was a scandal, a sin. Could I build something with Julian while carrying that weight? As we parted ways, his smile promised more, but doubt gnawed at me. This was only the beginning, and already, it felt like a risk I wasn't sure I could take. The next week was a blur of texts and stolen moments. Julian had a way of making the world feel brighter, like he was the sun breaking through my fog. But every step closer to him pulled me further from the version of myself I'd built to survive. We met again at a dive bar in the Castro, neon signs casting pink and blue glows across his face. He was all easy charm, joking with the bartender, a trans woman named Riley who called him Doc, and slid us free shots. I watched Julian move through the room, comfortable in his skin, while I felt like an imposter. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his hand brushing mine under the table. I wanted to tell him everything. How I'd spent years dodging questions about girlfriends. How my dad's voice still echoed, calling people like us confused. Instead, I smiled and said, "Just tired." The truth was I was terrified. Julian was out, proud, a dentist with a life that made sense. I was a mess of half-finished designs and unspoken truths. What could I offer him? That night, as we walked along Market Street, he stopped to buy flowers from a street vendor, a non-binary artist named Sam with paint-splattered jeans. Julian handed me a daisy, grinning. "For your thoughts," he said. I clutched it like a lifeline, but my silence stretched too long. His smile faltered, and I hated myself for it. Back at my cramped apartment, we sat on my thrift store couch, the daisy now tucked behind my ear. Julian's fingers traced my palm, and I let myself lean into him. "Ezra," he murmured, "you don't have to hide from me." His words cracked something open, and I told him about Ohio, the church sermons, the way I'd learned to shrink myself. He listened, his eyes never leaving mine, and when I finished, he pulled me close. "You're enough," he said, "just as you are." I wanted to believe him, but doubt was a stubborn stain. The next day, I got a call from my old friend Marcus, still back in Ohio. He'd heard rumors. Someone saw me in the city, holding hands with some guy. His voice was sharp, accusing. "You're not that way, are you, Easy?" I froze, the phone heavy in my hand. I could have lied, could have laughed it off like I always had. But Julian's face flashed in my mind, and I hung up without a word. The silence felt like a choice, but it left me shaking. Julian invited me to a community event at the San Francisco LGBT Center, a fundraiser with drag performances and open mic poetry. The room was alive with people, queer, trans, non-binary, every shade of human. I felt like an outsider, but Julian's hand in mine anchored me. A poet named Aisha, a black trans woman in her 30s, read a piece about love as resistance, and I felt her words carve into me. Could I be that brave? As we left, Julian's arm around me, I caught a stranger's glare, a reminder that not everyone saw love like Aisha did. Fear crept back, but Julian's warmth kept it at bay. For now. Weeks turned into months, and Julian became my gravity. We'd meet for late-night tacos, dance at underground clubs, or just walk the Embarcadero, the bay sparkling like it was cheering us on. But every moment of joy came with a shadow. My family's calls grew more frequent, their questions sharper. "When are you coming home, Ezra?" my mom asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't tell her I'd found a home in Julian's arms. One night, we went to a gallery opening in Soma, hosted by a queer artist collective. The walls were alive with color, paintings of bodies embracing, unapologetic and free. Julian introduced me to his friend Lena, a 28-year-old Chinese-American lesbian who ran the show. She eyed me curiously, then grinned. "You're good for him," she whispered, nudging Julian. I blushed, but her words felt like a badge I wasn't sure I'd earned. Later, as we stood before a painting of two men kissing, Julian's hand slipped into mine. "This could be us," he said, half joking, but his eyes were serious. My chest tightened. I wanted that future, but the weight of my past, of expectations, of shame, was a chain I hadn't broken. I pulled away, muttering about needing air. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent to my panic. Julian followed, his voice gentle. "Ezra, what's wrong?" I couldn't meet his eyes. How do you tell someone you love them when you're still learning to love yourself? The next day, I found a letter slipped under my door. My landlord, a gruff old man, had scrawled a note about complaints from neighbors. Someone had seen Julian leaving my place too often. "Keep it discreet," the note warned. My stomach churned. This was San Francisco, the heart of freedom, and still I wasn't safe. I didn't tell Julian, but he noticed my distance. At dinner, he pushed his plate aside and said, "Talk to me, Ezra. Please." I wanted to, but the words stuck like glue. Then came the call that broke me. My dad, his voice cold as steel, said he'd heard things from Marcus. "You're throwing your life away," he spat. "Come home and fix this." I hung up, tears burning, and deleted his number. But his words echoed, poisoning the joy Julian brought me. That night, I canceled our plans, claiming a deadline. Julian's text, "I'm here when you're ready," felt like a lifeline I was too scared to grab. I sat alone, staring at the daisy he'd given me, now wilted. Could I keep doing this? Loving him in secret, hiding from the world? The distance grew, a crack widening between us. Julian tried to reach me. Texts, calls, even a handwritten note left at the clinic. "Ezra, let me in." But I was drowning in my own head, my fears louder than his love. I avoided Bright Smile, avoided the Castro, avoided anywhere our paths might cross. San Francisco, once my refuge, felt like a maze closing in. One rainy night, I wandered into a bookstore in No Valley, seeking distraction. A queer open mic was underway, and a young non-binary poet named Kai, maybe 22, was reading about their first love. Their words, raw, fearless, hit me like a punch. I saw myself in their story, saw the boy who'd hidden for too long. When I stepped outside, Julian was there, soaked from the rain, his eyes searching mine. "I'm not giving up on you," he said, his voice breaking. I wanted to run, but his hand on my arm held me still. We ended up at his place, a cozy apartment filled with plants and old jazz records. Over coffee, I spilled everything. My dad's words, the landlord's note, the shame I couldn't shake. Julian listened, his hand steady on mine. "You don't have to fight this alone," he said. "But you have to choose, you, me, us." His words were a mirror, forcing me to face the truth. I kissed him, desperate, like I could pour all my fear into that moment and let it go. But it wasn't enough. The next week, I got a text from Marcus. He was in town, wanted to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a diner in the Tenderloin, his eyes hard as he leaned across the table. "You're not gay, Ezra," he said, like he could will it away. "You're just lost." I thought of Julian, of the life we could have, and for the first time I didn't flinch. "I'm not lost," I said, my voice steady. "I'm found." I walked out, heart pounding, feeling lighter than I ever had. But freedom came with a cost. My mom called, crying, saying Dad had cut me off. No more calls, no more visits. I sat on my couch, the weight of their rejection crushing me. Julian came over, uninvited but exactly what I needed. He didn't say much, just held me as I cried. "You're my family now," he whispered, and I clung to him, terrified but hopeful. The world was bigger than Ohio, bigger than fear. Maybe I could be bigger too. Spring came, painting San Francisco in blooms and possibility. Julian and I were a unit now, navigating the city hand in hand. I'd started therapy at the LGBT Center, unpacking years of shame with a counselor named Priya, a South Asian woman in her 40s whose warmth made it easier to breathe. I wasn't fixed, but I was learning to live out loud. One evening, Julian took me to Ocean Beach, the waves crashing under a cotton candy sky. He pulled out a small box, his hands trembling. Inside was a simple silver ring, etched with a tiny daisy. "Not a proposal," he said, grinning. "Just a promise to be here always." I slipped it on, tears blurring the sunset. "I'm in," I said, and meant it. We kissed as the tide rolled in, the world wide open around us. But life wasn't a fairy tale. My landlord's threats escalated, and I had to move. Julian helped me pack, and we found a place together in the Mission, a tiny studio with a view of the skyline. Our first night, surrounded by boxes, we danced to his old jazz records, laughing until we collapsed. I still got voicemails from Ohio, but they hurt less now. I'd built something stronger, a family of choice with Julian, Lena, Riley, and others who saw me for me. At a Pride event that June, I took the open mic stage, my hands shaking as I read a poem about Julian, about love as a rebellion against fear. The crowd cheered, and Julian's eyes shone with pride. I'd spent years hiding, but here in this city with him I was free. Not perfect, not fearless, but free. As we walked home, hand in hand, I thought of that first touch in the dentist's chair. Open wide, he'd said, and I had, in ways I never imagined. Love wasn't just a moment. It was a choice, a fight, a promise. And with Julian by my side, it was a promise I'd keep forever.